Hey y'all, welcome back to Water Moon Cards. It's Luna, and we are going to talk today some more about tarot aesthetics. So, this is a topic that's been on my mind for a little while. Today, I want to talk about tarot aesthetics in the context of restoration and, again, material considerations, both the cardstock, the contrast on the art, the level of restoration, and what that does to our ability to read the cards, relate to them, understand them, emotionally connect with them, all those things. We're going to be using the Tarot Jaques Vieville, and I have 3 different versions of this. So, left to right, we have the Tarot Vieville reproduction, and this is a facsimile from the version in the Bibliothèque Nationale France. It is produced by Joseph Peterson, and it is a facsimile, so it has not been restored, but it is on a more modern paper. This paper has a coating on it of some kind of a varnish. You can see it's sort of a satin finish, so I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's not plain cardstock. It's thicker, it's more stiff than a playing card deck. In the center, we have a deck that my mother very kindly gave me for winter holiday gift-giving time. This is the version from Tarot Sheet Revival, Sullivan Hismans out of Belgium. He does a very sympathetic kind of restoration. So I wanted to look at these side by side and see what he's done with the deck. As you can see, the cards are physically larger, but when you look at the artwork, really it's just down to him adding this faux border on the outside, and I call it faux because decks of this time would have a folded over border. So it would be 2 pieces of paper glued together, and then the back side would be folded and glued in order to create a stiffer edging around the card and protect the deck and make it more shuffleable and more durable. So Sullivan Hismans has artistically recreated a border with these stripy lines all the way around. And then on the right side, we have the most modern take on this, and it's a restoration done in computer, redrawn by the good folks at Artisan Tarot. They make lovely, crisp recreations of historic decks, and this is on like casino grade cardstock. So it's bright white, it's plastic coated, which means it's very durable. It's nice, thin, flexible cardstock, very easy to shuffle. And so I don't want to belabor all this and, spend too much time here. I'm just going to walk through the deck, maybe pose some questions more than answers, because really all of this is up to our own personal taste and what we like. As I was about to get started there, I realized I could zoom in a little bit more for you so you can see the details more clearly. As we're flipping through this deck, and I'll go ahead and start doing that, but as we're going through this, just, look for differences and let me know what you think. I will say, I have some preferences, and really none of these decks is exactly what I would want. But there is one that's the closest, and that's probably Sullivan Hismans here in the middle. We can see right off the bat there's some different color choices, and I read Sullivan Hismans' description in the post on his website for this deck and his choices in restoration. And what he's pointing out is that what seems like a faded brown in this deck, or just darker ink, could actually be a light blue overlaid over top of the gold to create this softer green color. So I can see that now that he's pointed it out, not just in his art, but in the original. And that's what he's done throughout the deck, is he's used this green here. He also maintains a certain amount of roughness to the deck. So he doesn't fix, every single little ink overspill or, random brush mark or whatever. He does tidy it up a bit, but he also leaves some of that. You can see a little bit here. And he cleans up the line work and improves the contrast and all that, just so that this is easier to read. But I don't think he's gone and redrawn. I think what he's done is retouched the original. And then where over here you have like a perfect, computer overtrace of the deck, or redraw. I'm not sure exactly how they do it, but I would imagine they would have the original behind and actually go in and retrace, which is a ton of work. And it's very well done here. It's just a little bit too clean for me, but I'm curious what you all think. What I like in my historic cards is the feeling of a historic object. I like to be connected to history, but I also I want to know that I can actually read this, and that I'm not just going to be subject to the vagaries of time and wear and tear. So for example, here, these two restorers have actually finished off the name where it's kind of faded on the original here. And, I assume that was either a printing error or maybe the blocks were really old or something like that. But it wasn't the intention of the original printer to have the name obscured like that. It's just part of what happened with the deck. And I apologize, I did not go through and realign all these, so I may have to do some flipping and flopping. And another thing I'll point out is that Sullivan Hissman's reds here are much brighter and more vibrant than the original. And guess what? They were using naturally derived pigments back in 1650. So all of these colors are going to oxidize and, kind of turn brown or fade in intensity. And so you lose a lot of the vibrancy of a freshly printed deck by having a facsimile. So that's the other thing, is that I like to be in touch with history, but I like to be in touch with history as it would have appeared at the time, and not what 400 years of wear and tear and oxidation and, neglect and whatever have done to a deck. And that's where I appreciate something like Sullivan Hissman's work. Other printers who do this would include, I think, Giordano Berti. I believe he does a little bit of restoration on some of his decks. Pablo Robledo certainly does, and I have a couple of his as well. So I want to make another video kind of highlighting some of these, artists who are bringing back tarot history in a very sympathetic and interesting way. Yeah, we'll see what happens. This is interesting. There seems to be some kind of weird artifact here in Sullivan Hissman's card that's not actually on the facsimile. So who knows what happened with that. The other thing I'll point out is that the deck on the left has a slightly, it's closer to white, but it has a slightly yellowy eggshell kind of quality to the backgrounds. And then the deck on the right is, of course, stark white. So in case that's not showing up on your monitor, the middle deck it's more of a peachy, creamy kind of color, and it's a little bit less contrast than what I'm seeing in my monitor. So it's the background is a little bit darker in person than it's showing up on screen. Here again, we have we have missing ink here, and Sullivan Hissman has filled it in, but he's done it in such a way that it still is a believable stencil overspill. And I think where we're really going to benefit is when we get to some of the face cards. The pips, we kind of know what they are. We know what they're supposed to look like. So I just realized I got this slightly out of order. I was comparing the 8 and the 10 on the Artisan Tarot to the wrong card. So this is all the 10 of coins. And what I was saying is, once we get to the face cards, which we have the first one coming up here, this is where I think we really benefit, because we can get more of an idea of their expression if their face isn't all faded out. And I like that Sullivan Hissman's has brought back a little bit more contrast here, a little bit more detail, but he's done it in such a way that's very sympathetic, and we don't lose the original kind of intention and coloration. Here, Artisan Tarot, for whatever reason, has decided to color in the hair, which, isn't a bad decision. I just don't read that as close to the original as what Sullivan Hissman's has done. Sullivan Hissman's has actually put in these red buttons, but I can see a tiny hint of that here in the original. So I don't think this is actually out of reach for this. I just think this red dye or ink has faded a bit. Interesting that they don't seem to really have pupils on the original deck. Sullivan Hissman has added them in, but they're very fine details here. I don't know if you can see that. Maybe I'll hold this one up. So you can see more of an expression there with the pupils, and Artisan Tarot has actually filled them in all the way. So this looks a bit more, I would say, a bit more cartoony for that reason. We get like the most grumpy queen on the left, medium grumpy in the middle, and then just a little tired on the right, based on the heaviness of the eye, the line work around the eye. And a lot of restorations that I see nowadays do tend to lean into this artisan tarot style, where you've just used a computer and you've used a gradient tool to kind of mimic the overlay of color from the original. But to me, this is a little too smooth, a little too polished. And my light is picking up the hashing from the cardstock here. But if I hold it at an angle, you can see that this is all one, filled in, same value kind of gradient here. Whereas on Sullivan Hissman's restoration, you get more of that stippling. You get more of the idea that this was a stencil and then someone came in with a brush and, put the paint in there, and maybe did it rather hastily, and then you get these kind of stippling and brush strokes and unevenness there. So I can see the original artist's hand from 1650 here, and I just can't see it over here. And again, this is all just a matter of personal taste. There's lots of folks on Etsy who are doing their own restorations on their computers and redrawing. It is just a matter of personal choice, personal design, and what you're going to do about leaving artifacts in, taking them out, fixing things, not fixing things, or even adding in more, a little more sloppiness to make something a little bit more historic feeling. The other thing that we get in the Artisan Tarot is this dark, solid black. And then, here we can see in the facsimile, that black ink, which was probably made with iron gall, would have kind of either flaked off the paper or, chewed through something maybe and faded in a certain way. A lot of times your blacks fade out. And then Sullivan Hissman's has brought that back a little bit, but not to the stark, solid contrast of the modern recreation. So again, that happy medium is where I'm at with this. Sorry, I'm trying to pay attention a little bit better now that I know that I didn't quite get the Artisan Tarot deck completely back in order. I was chatting with someone while I was doing it yesterday and clearly was not paying complete attention. It's kind of hard to tell some of these Wands cards apart, especially since this is not your traditional Marseille pattern. The foliage is a little different. I'm just not as familiar with it. So that's the 5, here's the 6. And again, I do like the Artisan Tarot deck. It's very clear, it's very easy to read, it's very easy on the eyes. I'm not having to search around so much. And so I don't want to give the impression that I'm picking on the Artisan Tarot deck. Interesting choice here to show this baton peeping through the center poles, even though that doesn't seem to be indicated on the original. But I like it, I like it, and I'm not necessarily a purist about history. Like I said, I have both Pablo Robledo's decks, which, sometimes the color interpretation is a little open there. And I also have some completely recolored and reimagined historic decks. So for me, it's not about purist intentions or, sticking with history or only reading with something that looks like it's, the age now that it is. But it's really more about what feels comfortable and what's interesting and what excites me. And for me, part of the excitement of reading with a historic deck is feeling connected, to people that were playing cards and living in a world with these decks back then. And then also being able to pick out and notice details that I might miss from, a very old deck that has lost a lot of its character or details. What I like about this central image here is how much Sullivan Hissman's has gone in and fixed a lot of the line work and the contrast, so you can really see the writer's outfit, especially in this central area here, much more so than the facsimile. And also Artisan Tarot has done a good job cleaning all that up, although their ink is a little bit heavier in saturation here, so it's a little harder to see some of the details on the horse than it is in the central card. And here the queen's face is a little bit obliterated, so it's hard to read her expression. Here I feel like it's brought out and retouched just enough to be able to read it, and here it's slightly altered. This face is a little bit different from this one. So many subtle differences, and I could, probably make this video 2 hours long by comparing them like this, but I'm just trying to give you a hint of what I'm seeing, and, you can slow down the video, pause, or look more carefully yourself. Sorry. I just noticed this funny thing with the cup. Okay, if that's an eyeball and that's a tongue, isn't that funny? I've never noticed that before. Anyway. All right, Luna, enough joking around. Here's the rest of the poem that's in this deck. The first part is on the Ace of Coins, and then we get the second part here in the Two of Cups. Here in the facsimile, we get one of these weird vertical lines, but it's not in Sullivan Hisman's version. So yeah, I can't really explain that, but it just says printing error to me. So maybe it's meant to be a mark of authenticity. I don't know. I also love how crooked, this whole deck is. The whole thing is very crooked, asymmetrical, both in the size, the size of the individual items, and then also how they're centered or not, drawn or not. Yeah, it's pretty funny. But it's what gives this deck its character and why you might pick, this over something else or something else over this. Because it is different and it does have this wonkiness to it. Again, love that, just the hint of green in here. And Artisan Tarot has brought that out just a tiny bit here, but it's more shades of blue than it is in the center part. And here Artisan Tarot has added in red highlights inside the center of the flowers, which doesn't appear to be on the originals, and Sullivan Hisman's didn't seem to think that either. But I really like this. I actually think that's a nice, it balances out the composition. We'll also give you a self-shuffling demonstration at the end. And this is interesting. Artisan Tarot has decided to kind of add a little more fancy detail to this Page of Cups outfit. So, for example, it looks like an enamel cup now with this black enamel and the gold and the red above it, whereas here it's red over top of black, showing that here as well. And then on his pantaloons, we just sort of get the idea that they're striped in broad strokes because, again, it would have been hard to cut out a stencil and have, alternating stripes exactly so. But here, because this is computer rendered, Artisan Tarot could show you that, like, the inside of the pleat is one color and the outside of the pleat is a different color. So, interesting choices there. We've colored in the mustache and eyebrows of the king. And you'll notice that Artisan Tarot does not ever have these missing bits of ink here. All of theirs is filled in completely. Here you have this misprint kind of thing. And actually this one might maybe go that way. Is that more accurate? Yeah, it's leaning to the side. I don't even know if swords are supposed to go up or down in this deck. So, however I have them on two, I'll turn the other one to match. Oops, see, there you go. Maybe they go down, maybe they go up. Maybe you know. Is there a definitive up or down? I'm sure our esotericist friends would have something to say about that. I have no idea what it is, though. Oh, I love touches of green. I really do. Green and purple, and just add something. I'll talk more about my taste in historic decks in another video, but I'm just not into the all primary colors decks. I don't really have very many French decks at all for that reason, because just this color palette I find kind of boring. I need more. I need purple and green in there. Again, here we have very difficult to read, easier to read, still a little bit fine in the line work in some places, and then quite easy to read. And I was waiting to get a copy of this deck because up until, fairly recently, you could either have one extreme or the other, but you couldn't have this in the middle. So fancy. All right, now we're into Triumph suit. And yes, I have put the Fool at the end. That is how a lot of decks were sold, and in this deck, he is not numbered. So I've stuck him at the end. I was going to say the Magician's not numbered, but you can actually see a very faint number 1 up here on the original, so he is numbered. But you'll notice none of these are labeled, so whoever this person is, the Papess, because she's got the triple crown on. Here I think Artisan Tarot has preserved the expression on the face quite well. They haven't really added anything or shifted it. Did color in her hair though. And I am going by the numbers on the cards in this deck, so they're numbered differently than what we're used to. But this is 8, the Chariot. 9 is La Force, Strength. And I think these marks on the face are used to indicate age. I was noticing that on another card just a second ago, so that's interesting. Strength through experience. The character with their head coming around the wheel just always cracks me up. Like, hey, what's going on? It reminds me of Owlie from Owl House, if you guys ever watched that show, animated show. Oh, and our upside down, right side up hangman. Kind of what this deck is known for, its unique feature. Love how colorful and complex this death card is. So many body parts. Classic devil card, and one that Patrick Valenza has used in his Triumph della Luna. This is one option for the devil card. I love it. His claws and his little horns, his little tiny bat wings. Here we have the lightning, a shepherd under a tree, in a storm. I love the way the Artisan Tarot has differentiated the shape here. Really nice job. Star as an astronomer, which is, I think, more fitting than a naked lady by a pond myself. A baby on a horse, look at that. Kind of a cranky son, too. This guy looks like he's pleading 5 more minutes. I like the amount of cleanup that Sullivan Hismans has done here. I think he's done it in a way that still feels connected to the original intent of the card, but also allows some of the individual details to come through and differentiates things like this guy right here being, you know, part of the background or not. Interesting interpretation here on the Artisan Tarot to color in the whole cape. And our Fool card. So, as promised, I'm going to zoom out and give you a shuffling demonstration of each one of these. So before we do the demo, I wanted to show you the difference in thickness, because this really tells you a lot about what the cardstock is like, I think. The thicker the card, typically the stiffer it is, and that makes it much harder to shuffle. So you can see that Sullivan Hismans deck is probably, I would say, 30% thicker than the Artisan Tarot Consino cardstock, and these two are about the same thickness, and they're different. They are different cardstocks. The Joseph Peterson on the left here feels denser, but somehow the decks end up being a similar thickness to each other. So say a prayer for me here, folks. All right. Okay, so first up is the Joseph Peterson. This is incredibly slippery because it's got that coating on it. And it's stiff and it does not want to bend. But if I go slow, I can do it. But I can't bridge. So I just have to push them together like that. I'll do that one more time. So very slow and carefully. And then just slide together. They do slide nicely because they're so slippery. So that's a viable shuffling option for that one. I do not have high hopes for Sullivan Hismans. I have told him that I do not like his cardstock. The deal with this is that if you try to bend it too much, you will just crease it and you will ruin cards. And you know, of all these three, this is the most expensive one, which I'm happy to pay independent artists whatever they want, because I think their time and their talents are well worth it. But it makes me nervous to try to use something like, that's all I want to bend this. So I'm basically doing the waterfall method here, and you can see that I don't get a very good integration. It's just clumps of cards. So it's disappointing. These are somewhat slippery, and so you can certainly do the overhand, but as I explained in a recent video, that does not get you a randomization. So because my mother was kind enough to also buy me this copy, this one doesn't belong to me. This is actually hers. This one does belong to me, and this one's mine. So what I do when I want to read with this is I shuffle this deck, pick my cards, and then go find the corresponding ones. Because the Artisan Tarot deck, you can do this. And it's lovely. And it's comfortable, and I'm not worried about it creasing. Now, you may say, okay, well, that's the trade-off, right? You have to have casino grade cardstock if you want to shuffle it like that. But actually, I have several decks by another card maker, and I'll get into this in another video, that actually shuffle kind of like this one does. So, but they're made out of paper, they're not plastic coated, and they feel historic, and they look historic because they're cream colored, not white. So there is actually a better option for historic decks, in my opinion, than this. That is it for this video. Yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for putting up with my rambling, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.